Hi everyone, and welcome to my talk about using OWASP NetHacker for recon and vulnerability scanning. My name is Sam Stepanian. You can find me on Twitter at SecureStep9. I'm an OWASP London chapter leader, and I'm also an OWASP NetHacker project co-leader. A little bit more about me. I come from a software development background. I'm an ex-developer myself. So currently I'm working as an application security consultant in financial services in the City of London. So if you look at my profile, all in all, I am a defender. So why am I presenting a talk which consists of words network and attacker? There's a tool called NetHacker, network attacker. So I have a bit of a story to tell about this. First of all, I tried NetHacker myself in 2017. I saw a new project appearing in the list of OWASP projects. I'm like, okay, let me try and run this thing. I didn't understand anything because it just spits out a whole bunch of options. I was like, what the hell is all this stuff? I'm not going to go through it. And I forgot about it. But then I realized that I had to look at this project again because Dr. Greg Fracos and I were asked to demonstrate this tool at Black Hat Europe 2018 in London. And the thing is that the original NetHacker project leaders could not make it to London in time. So as you know, we have Black Hat Europe conference in December each year in London. So I'm like, okay, yeah, guys, we're going to help you out. But Greg and I had zero clue about what the hell is this tool, right? It's like we had to learn it overnight on a Zoom call. And then I said, okay, we love this tool. Let's go and present it and talk about this. And then this happened. We had a huge crowd of pen testers, security researchers coming to the stand to actually see what the hell is this tool doing. And we said, okay, people love this tool. I became a project co-leader. Let's try it the year after. And then 2019, even bigger crowd of people gathered saying, oh my God, there is a free scanner from OWASP. We want to see what that is. So so what is OWASP NetHacker and why is it attracting large crowds of people who do pen testing, bug bounty hunting, and just people from organizations who want to find out what kind of things, what kind of vulnerabilities exist and what kind of things they can scan inside the network. So first of all, OWASP NetHacker is an open source software tool and it is absolutely free. It comes from OWASP. And it is built to assist with pen testing and automating information gathering and recon tasks. So it can do vulnerability scanning, it can do information gathering, it can do port scan, and I'm going to live demo it today. I'm going to pray to the live demo gods that it's all going to work fine. Another important thing about NetHacker is that it's written in Python, and because it's in Python, you can really run it on anything which runs Python. So Dr. Greg Fracos actually managed to run it on Raspberry Pi, and he said, Sam, it's working. I said, okay, great. I'm not really a Raspberry Pi enthusiast myself. Another very interesting thing about NetHacker, for those of you who are students in the audience, or you have friends, children, nephews, nieces who are students, there is a program called Google Summer of Code. And that is an initiative by Google. It's a paid internship, which happens every year. And basically what students do, they apply to enhance or improve an open source project, which participates in Google Summer of Code. And then students work on that open source project during the summer break, and they are supported by mentors. And OWASP participates in Google Summer of Code every single year. There are various projects. Sometimes OWASP NetHacker is there, but it's not just OWASP. There are lots of other open source organizations. But we're very happy because we say this is a tool which has been written and enhanced by students, so which makes it even more interesting. So you can think of OWASP NetHacker as a Swiss Army knife kind of tool. So just like a Swiss Army knife, it's a tool consisting of many tools which are not necessarily compatible with each other, but can they all be used together? So just like a Swiss Army knife, NetHacker is a collection of tools. It has a modular structure. It's easy to create your own modules. Previously, we used Python for modules. Now we use YAML, which makes it even easier. It's a fast-performing tool, which is using multi-threading model in NetHacker to spin up multiple threads, so you can actually control the speed of scanning. For people doing, for example, bug bounty, or just people scanning their network, it might be quite important how hard they hit the network with scanning traffic. It has something called customizable profiles, which are basically a bundle of modules focused on a specific task. And most importantly, you can automate it and run it from command line. That's the greatest thing. You can just create a command line, press enter, it's running, and it's scanning your network. So a few other bits about NetHacker. It is not officially released yet. It is not a production-ready tool, really. It's not even beta. Current version is 003, but I'm going to talk about version 002 today. We are always looking for more contributors, so if you know Python, please do join us. I will have a slide about developers and how to contribute a bit later. So NetHacker, however, has command line interface. It has a web UI. It has an API, so you can query it using an API. It has a report generator, and it also has Maltego transforms. Those of you using Kali Linux and use Maltego tool, there are transforms available. It has over 70 modules at the moment. Where do you find this tool? You can find it at owas.org www.project NetHacker, and it's also on GitHub. And if you go on GitHub, please click on the wiki button, because that's where all the installation instructions are. That's where all the documentation is. We use the wiki in GitHub for documentation purposes. I'm not going to demo how to install NetHacker here, but I actually have a video recorded, and I will point you towards that video a bit later. So for you to understand the difference between NetHacker and other scanners, you probably heard of, or you're actually using tools such as Burp Suite or OWASP Zap. So the difference is that the scanners such as Burp Suite or OWASP Zap, they scan one website for many web application vulnerabilities, whatever the scanner is able to find, right? So, for example, Burp will crawl one website to discover all URLs, all parameters, all forms, will click on all the buttons, right? That's not what NetHacker does. NetHacker scans one or many, and that can be hundreds or thousands of IP addresses, networks or subdomains for open ports, and one or more specific vulnerabilities listed by the user. And you can also bundle that in modules, which means you can basically say, okay, I'm interested in this, this, and this, and this, bundle it in a module, and basically pull out several modules at once in one profile from out of your Swiss Army knife, and then say, okay, go and scan it. So that is the major difference, because it's a tool for attacking networks. That's why it's called OWASP NetHacker. So you can download and install NetHacker from GitHub. I'm going to use version 001 today in my demo, because the latest version still has a couple of issues. However, it has great new features. If you're going to install it yourself, always read the manual, because in the wiki, we actually list all the dependencies that you need. And you would typically just do a git clone from GitHub and then use pip install to install it, because it is a Python tool. Those of you interested in installing it in Kali Linux, because I will be using Kali Linux today for a live demo, there's a video that I recorded some time ago where you can actually watch step by step what is needed to install this tool in your Kali Linux. However, if you are using a distribution called Black Arch Linux, I was very pleased to find out that these guys actually included OWASP NetHacker in their release, and it is actually there, and you can see version 002. It's a part of the Black Arch automation toolkit. So if you install that, you will see NetHacker inside Black Arch Linux. You can also run it in Docker. There's no official OWASP image yet. We have an OWASP Docker Hub account. There is no NetHacker there. However, you can just use Docker Compose to spin up your own. And I will be showing Docker to you today as well. So before I go any further, I have to give you a responsible use warning. So do not misuse this tool nor any other security tool for unauthorized access, and remind all of you that performing security scans without the permission from the owner of the computer system is illegal. And OWASP NetHacker, by its nature, is an offensive security tool. Even though I'm a defender, but I'm presenting to you an offensive security tool. Why do I love it so much? So, and how to understand what it does. So, it's very simple. NetHacker has three types of modules. It has a module of type scan, for example, port scan. You can just go and use it as an nmap and perform port scanning. It has a module of type vuln. So, for example, Apache Struts vulnerability is a type of vulnerability. You can just scan your entire network for that vulnerability, or for several vulnerabilities in one go if you wanted to. And it has a category of modules called brood. So you can perform brute forcing. For example, SSH brute will perform brute forcing over SSH. So I'm not going to go through all the NetHacker scan modules. I'm just going to bring your attention to some of the interesting ones, which I highlighted with asterisk. For example, admin scan allows you to find any admin or control panel kind of things running on your network. So, which is quite a good one. PMA scan is very similar. PMA stands for PHPMyAdmin, which is a very popular tool for MySQL database administration. And the problem with that tool is a lot of people use it in an insecure configuration, which means that if someone finds it, they can actually get to your database and extract all the passwords and secrets from it. Port scan is, of course, one of the popular ones. Subdomain scan is very important, so I'm going to show you how to scan subdomains and list the subdomains. WordPress was mentioned by the previous speaker, talking about log spoofing and using WordPress. NetHacker actually has a lot of modules around scanning WordPress, and say the simple thing that you can do here. For example, you can scan networks and find out if WordPress is running, and if it is, what version of WordPress is running. You can also find out what plugins are running, what themes, enumerate users, and lots of other stuff. And another cool module for scanning is called Wappalyzer. So that allows you to discover what kind of technology is running on the target web server. These are all the vulnerabilities. I'm not going to bring your attention to all these various vulnerabilities. It is possible to write your own module if you are intending to use the tool for a particular vulnerability. I will mention the Microsoft Exchange SSRF vulnerability, which was exploited by Hafnium, a Chinese group, last year, because we responded probably one of the first ones to provide a scanning module for this vulnerability a year ago. And also there are a few other vulnerabilities. For example, SSL certificate expired val module is proving to be very useful. You're going to go and, well, I use it to scan networks to find out if we have any devices with expired SSL certificates. And again, why is this a problem? If you have a device on your network with expired SSL certificate, most likely that means that the server is abandoned. No one is looking after it. And if it is abandoned, which means it's not patched, so it could be an easy vector for attackers to get in, right? Another one is called server version vuln. So that just shows you the server banner from the web server. It shows you what is running. And X-powered by is another very popular header in response, which shows you what is actually running on the server. But NetHacker is not just scanning for vulnerabilities and subdomains and ports. It is also a brute forcing tool embedded in the same package. So it can perform brute forcing using FTP, HTTP basic auth, HTTP forms, your traditional login username password forms on the website, NTLM, SMTP, SSH. So SSH in particular is quite useful. You can scan your whole network, find out, do you have anything which responds to admin username password. Telnet, for those people still using Telnet in their networks. There's a reason why Telnet is there. And there's a very useful module for WordPress people. That's WordPress XML RPC brute forcing. Again, allows you to brute force WordPress installations. Now, NetHacker was originally called IoT Scan, and it's still its Twitter handle if you want to find that tool on Twitter. So the original intention of authors was to scan your network for IoT devices, then scan these IoT devices for open ports, and then brute scan for default credentials. So this is how the project was originally born, but now it grew to be much more than that. And also one interesting thing here, there's a logo. So whenever you see this little radar logo, to recognize NetHacker. One of the most popular NetHacker scanning modules is Port Scanner. But I think that it's much easier to use and faster compared with Nmap. A lot of security researchers, they have their sort of love and hate relationship with Nmap. And since I started using NetHacker, I just stopped using Nmap for almost everything. It's just easier for most of the stuff that I need to use. NetHacker, I think, is much more easier. You can add threads and also you can control the velocity of scanning, which is, I think, quite important. As I mentioned, it's using Python multi-threading by default. If you run NetHacker scan, it's okay. It's not going to overload your network with lots of traffic compared with Nmap, which can actually, I know cases where those flooding network switches and firewalls. And another important thing, if you are performing a port scan, by default, NetTucker will use 1,000 most popular ports. So it's similar to Nmap, but you can add -g parameter and then just list the port numbers that you are interested. So this is how you would run NetTucker, and this is why when I first ran it, I didn't understand what to do, right? Because it just spits out a whole bunch of usage instructions. But to run NetTucker, you need two things, right? Two parameters. You need to give it a target. What are you going to scan? And you need to give it a module. What module you're going to be performing your scan with, right? Which blade that you're going to pull out your Swiss Army knife. And here are a couple of examples. If you want to perform a port scan on just one IP address, you just put that IP address in there. However, you can also specify the whole subnet using the -24 notation is this particular case. And in fact, you can define targets in different formats. So we've seen the single IP. You can also define a whole range of IP addresses by providing a start IP and ending IP. CIDR/bits notation. You can also scan a whole domain, right? That's interesting. I'm going to show you how to scan OWASP.org in my live demo because I'm allowed to scan it. And you can also define a URL. Just one URL, which could be HTTP or HTTPS. So these are all the different types of OWASP NetTucker targets. However, you can also scan targets defined in a text file. Why is this convenient? Because your organization, you probably will have several domain names. You will have different networks, right? So how do you scan everything, your entire organization, right? Just put it all in one text file, and then you can just load the list of target from a text file. Easy. And again, you define which module you want to use to scan all your networks. Another really cool feature of NetTucker that you can chain modules. So rather than just using one module, you can just use comma and say, I want to use method 1 or module 1, module 2. And here's an example. For example, if I want to perform a port scan, phpMyAdmin scan on this target, I'll just list them with a comma. If I want to scan the whole of OWASP.org and perform a port scan and check if there's a server version leakage vulnerability, and I want to limit that port scan to ports 80 and 443, this is what I can do. So this is very convenient. So profiles, as we mentioned before, another great feature of NetTucker is because there's lots of modules, you can bundle modules into profiles. There are some profiles which are already pre-built for you, and they come with NetTucker by default. So there's one called Info, so that will include all the information gathering modules. There's a profile called Scan, obviously that's all the scanning modules. One Brute will perform all the brute forcing. Vuln is all vulnerabilities. There's also a WP for WordPress. So if you want to scan a WordPress website, there are quite a lot of WordPress modules. You can just use them all. There's a Joomla one for Joomla CMS. And there's a magical profile called All. You say, okay, I want to use all the modules, all my target. Of course, it's going to be very, very slow. But that's what you would do. You would just define your target with -I, and you specify with whichever profile you want. For example, information gathering will be Info. Okay, enough talking. You all want to see it in action. I'm going to switch to Kali Linux and I'm going to show you how this tool works. Right? Let's pray to the gods of live demo it works. Okay. So as I mentioned before, if you just run NetTucker using Python, right, with no parameters, you're just going to spit out how to use it, right? So there's lots of options here, include methods and exclude methods. Okay. So I'm going to show you, I hope this is visible, how to use NetTucker. So I'm going to do nettucker.py, and I have to define a target. Okay. So let me define OWASP.org, right? Our organization that I'm allowed to scan. But what I'm going to do, first of all, I want to run a subdomain scan. Okay. So it's a very simple thing. Subdomain scan. Okay. You can see it when the module, when it loads, it will show us the, provided the live demo works now. It should load the file, and also, come on, that is not good. Yeah, it's loading now. So it should tell us how many modules it has loaded, 72 modules, and then it will start trying to connect to the target and will start scanning it for all the subdomains. Because it is saying check your internet connection, just let me quickly check that my Wi-Fi is working. It looks like my Wi-Fi is not working. Maybe that's why it was not doing what it was supposed to be doing. Let me check. Do we have Wi-Fi? This is the worst thing which can happen. We will lose Wi-Fi connectivity in the middle of the demo. Yeah, and it's back on. Okay, let's try again. Hope it works this time. Right, let's try again. Right. Okay, now it's much faster. This is how it is supposed to work, and you can see how quickly it discovered all the subdomains of OWASP.org. And now what I want to do, I want to do something else, because you can see I found all the subdomains. I want to do a server version scan. Okay, and but what that means, if I don't provide anything, server version vulnerability. So I want to see if OWASP.org is leaking what server it's running. So it's running Cloudflare, but that's just the main OWASP.org. I want to do this on all the subdomains. So I'm going to use a magic switch called -s, run this module on all the subdomains. So what's going to happen now is an attacker discovered all the subdomains of OWASP.org, and it's now going to go and check if any subdomains of OWASP.org are leaking their server version. You can see quite a few of them there. So this is a very, very useful feature. Okay, let's add a bit more oomph to this. So I only used one module, server version 1. I'm going to add x powered by 1. And I'm going to throw in another one, which is a very useful module, Wappalyzer scan. So Wappalyzer will tell me what is actually running. And again, I'm going to run the scan on the entire OWASP.org, the entire organization. So all the subdomains of OWASP.org are now going to be discovered. And you can see straight away, this is the results. And you can see already that Wappalyzer is discovering some programming languages, some frameworks. You can see Ruby in there. There's jQuery, Modernizer framework, lots of interesting stuff. And what is good is obviously doing it on all the subdomain of the organization. So when the scan finishes, I will have a very interesting result because I will know what assets OWASP.org has and how many of these assets are listening on ports 80 or 443, what kind of web server they're running, and what kind of technologies are actually running on the servers. So what you will notice at the bottom, you will say that, oh, there's a report and it is saved in this HTML file and the database. And database is very important because NetHacker has a built-in database. So every single scan that you perform doesn't disappear. It stays in the database and you can search it, you can use it, and you can export it, which is absolutely great. But let's have a look at this HTML file, the HTML report that was produced. Of course, you can see that by default, NetHacker output shows this kind of tabular format. So I'm going to show you in Firefox, like my Kali Linux should have Firefox, right? Let's see if it shows the report. There you go. This is the report. And this is the fantastic feature of NetHacker called Penetration Testing Graph. So you can see this is where the attack started. You can see it contacting all the subdomains and running each module on the subdomain. And you can see on some of the subdomains, some modules worked, so they produced a result, right? For example, here you have a server version vulnerability and the X-powered by vulnerability. On some others, you don't have it, but here you have Wappalyzer scan, right? So there you go. You can see what is running here. So Google Analytics, right? Programming languages, Ruby, jQuery. So this is very, very useful. So, but just by looking at this picture, you can understand a lot about what you have on the network. And then if we scroll down at the bottom of this report, we will find the same table that you saw in text ASCII format, but now it is in HTML. So it is much more useful because I can see all the subdomains of my organization, all the open ports, and all the technologies which are running on all the servers which are currently live. Yeah, this is very, very useful. There's a bit of a gimmick if I want to bring your attention to a particular result here. For example, secureflag.owas.org, which is our free training system for OWASP members. There you go. I can show you that these guys are actually running Nginx. Right? Okay. Let's remember Nginx because I'm going to talk about Nginx a little bit later. Okay. Let's go back to the slides because I have to talk about a few other interesting things. Of course, you have seen the graph, which is a very cool feature. NetHacker can also output reports in HTML, in JSON, and in CSV. So CSV is a very, very important thing because it allows us to get the same result in a spreadsheet. And I think everyone is going to love the fact that there is absolutely free and open source tool which allows you to scan your entire network, find out all the assets you have, all vulnerabilities you have, and get the output in Excel, right? It's amazing, isn't it? So how do I get it in CSV? I just add -o for output, and okay, I'll just name my CSV file results.csv. So now exactly the same scan will happen, right? Again, NetHacker is going to go discover all the subdomains of the organization, and then it's going to perform exactly the same scan as before. But instead of saving the result in HTML, it's going to save it in a CSV file. And you can see how it goes and discovers everything. And again, we reminded only do it on organizations that you're allowed to scan. And also, of course, at the moment, I'm just scanning owas.org and its subdomains, but you can do the same thing internally in your networks when you run it in your organization, and you can discover everything that you have. And I think it's a very important feature of NetHacker. Allows you to actually perform asset discovery. Okay, so there you go. This is the scan. You can see it's almost complete. There you go. We got the same tabular thing here. But look, it says report saved in results.csv this time. So I have, because this is Kali Linux, I have LibreOffice installed on this, rather Microsoft Office. And I'm going to go and have a look at this CSV file. And there you go. We have a spreadsheet. And it's a spreadsheet with all the assets, all the data. And because this is a spreadsheet, let's ignore the scan ID column from here because it's just the scan ID which allows you to uniquely identify the scan in the database. Because it is a spreadsheet, you can go and say, okay, I can just go and do data manipulation. I can go and filter. And remember, I said, okay, something was running Nginx. I'm like, okay, what is running Nginx on my network? I can just filter my Excel spreadsheet and find out straight away, right? I think it's a very, very cool feature. And a manager's dream report is in the spreadsheet. So I don't really know any other free and open source tool which can do this kind of stuff. And I think the spreadsheet is very important. But why is this also important? Because there's something called OWASP A0 or Asset Inventory. And that is actually a suggestion by Jeremiah Grossman, who when we were producing OWASP Top 10 for 2017 actually suggested and saying, well, number one problem that we're seeing is people don't really know what they're running in the organization. It's a problem which happens over and over again. That's why OWASP should introduce another vulnerability, asset inventory missing. And again, why is this important? Because if you don't know what you own, you cannot possibly secure it. This is why asset inventory is important, and you can produce it using this free and open source tool. Next, I'm going to talk about OWASP NetHacker API and Web UI. So NetHacker has a built-in web server. It's Flask, right? So those of you who know Python, okay? And so it's not really a production web server, but for our purposes, it's really cool, right? We're just using it to discover assets on our network and then search that data. So the important thing here, when you start the OWASP NetHacker in API mode, it will generate this random API key and will show it, and you need to just remember to copy paste it. By default, NetHacker will run on port 5000, but again, you can just override it and make it work on whichever port you want. This is what the API looks like. I'm actually going to, again, switch to my demo and show you how it can be done. Right, what do we do? Let me close my wonderful spreadsheet. Now I'm going to run NetHacker, but instead of doing any scans, I will put -- start the -API. That's it. This magical switch is now working, and you can see nothing's happening. It showed us the API key, which I'm going to copy, right? And stop, because now it's in the Flask web server is running, so it's awaiting for us to use a web browser to connect. Let's connect. So it's running on localhost and port 5000 by default. Let me go and launch my Firefox. Yeah, thank you very much, Kali Linux. So I'm going to do HTTPS 127.0.0.1, and I'm going to go 5000. Just delete the anything else. There you go. By default, it will tell me that the certificate is not trusted. Yeah, of course, if you want to run it with your own certificate and avoid the browser warning, you can always do that. Right. So that is the API and web UI of NetHacker. You cannot really click on anything here until you authenticate. You authenticate using an API key, which we copied. Let's paste it here. Okay, it says, yay, it's working. So what you're going to see now, if I click on results, you can see all the scans that I performed before. They are now visible in the web UI. Why? Because NetHacker used the database. So everything we did stayed in the database. So I can go and click on any of the scans. This was my previous one in CSV. I got a CSV format. If I were to click on the HTML one, I got my nice HTML report with a graph. So nothing is lost. And there's, of course, another important thing, because it is in the database, it is also searchable. So again, there's a crawler here. So you can use this as a kind of internal showdown for your networks. So you can use the tool, scan your networks, find out what you have, and then say, okay, do I have anything running Nginx? Yep, there you go, straight away. It found that was secure flag. What do we have running Atlassian, right? So there was something there, I remember. Oh, if I could spell, too many S's. There you go. It was contact.owas.org and ocms.owas.org. If I just make the screen a little bit bigger, hopefully it will be visible. There you go. So you can do your searches, and also you can also start a scan from here. Okay, so this is the new scan interface. It's going to ask you for a target. So again, let me try doing owasp.org. Okay, and you can see here the profiles that I talked about, they color coded. So everything which is scan and information gathering is green. Brute forcing is orange, right? And there are a few other profiles like WordPress and Joomla. And yeah, you can just tick the boxes. Okay, I want to scan my target. What do? I will pick port scanner. I will pick server version vulnerability, X powered by. What kind of graph do I want? Do I want a circle graph, or do I want the tree graph? You can also choose a language, right? Because see, not everyone speaks English. You can generate report in various languages, which are available here. And also we have an advanced here. So an advanced, you can say, okay, do you only want to scan owasp.org or your target, or you want to check all the subdomains? Because I asked for a port scan, we can define which ports we want to scan. And I want to scan port 480 and 443, right? And define any extra options. If we were performing brute forcing, this is where you would load your users and passwords. That is the place to put this information. And there's also extra module options. For example, there's integration with Shodan, surprise, surprise, with Census. and lots of other tools. And the tools which require API key, you can just program that API key here and provide options there. Well, of course, not just web UI, it's also an API. You can see how it works. So there's a JSON used for, of course, requests and responses. Once the scan is submitted, it's going to run it in the background. And again, we can check the results using the results button. And again, there's a convenient reload and last update button there as well. So you can just wait for the scan to complete. And once it's complete, you can just go and check it out. And while this is all happening, you can go and do exploration using the crawler. Again, I wanted to find out what was running Ruby, right? There was a Ruby there somewhere, right? So there you go. You can see how easily you can just use this tool to search, and there you go. You can see all the sites, all the web servers which were actually using Ruby. So this is, I think, very, very cool stuff. Same thing with the ports. You can search by port. Basically, you can search on anything that is in the database. So at the moment, it's just a free text search. Oh, Cloudflare, not Cloudflare. Let's try this. There you go. And this is all subdomains which have Cloudflare. There you go. Let's get back to our results. Another interesting thing that you can do with the results, right, is that you can also, for example, this result is in HTML, right? So we're getting a table. Rather than copy pasting it into your Excel, you have a very handy button here, so you can just go and get your CSV file and download it straight away, and just open it with Excel as normal. So that is the web UI. And now let's talk about vulnerabilities. Okay, so last year there was this massive Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities. There's an SSRF vulnerability, and everyone was rushing to fix it. And obviously, people who had Exchange exposed to the internet, if you have Web Outlook, there are, I think, more than 50,000 Exchange servers which were found to be vulnerable. And how do you know if you're vulnerable or not vulnerable? So we produced this module. You can see my tweet here about this vulnerability. We responded quite quickly. And what it allowed us to do, it allowed to scan networks. And I know that this tool was actually used by the CERT, by the Computer Emergency Response Teams of the several countries who scanned the country entire IP range. They found the vulnerable Microsoft Exchange servers using our tool, and then they contacted these organizations who were still running unpatched servers. So that's a very great success story for a little free open source tool written by students. And this is how you would do it. You just use NetHacker on your network, and you provide MS Exchange CVE 2021-26855 as a parameter, as a module that you wish to use to perform the scan. So NetHacker, to summarize the use cases, you can use it for asset discovery. You can scan your network for open ports. You can scan your network for new hosts, new web servers, SSH servers, whatever, right? You can scan your network for default credentials, right? Admin, of course, is a great example. And I found a whole bunch of audio-visual kit on one of my customers' network who asked me to perform this pen testing engagement, which is basically web cameras all around their premises, and they just had admin, so you can just connect and watch what is going on in the entire building using this. All right. You can also scan network for a specific vulnerability, like I showed you, for example, Exchange CVE. You can also scan subdomains of the organization and open ports on them. Discover expired SSL certificates. Again, a very great use case. Find subdomains hosting vulnerable versions of WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. Again, how you do it, because we have a module which actually shows the version of WordPress, and you can go say, okay, I've got like 500 WordPresses running in my network, and I can see the versions, and these ones are out of date, which are probably vulnerable. Of course, all the scans go into the database, searchable. You can download them as Excel spreadsheet. There's one little known fact about OWASP Top 10. There's a different type of OWASP Top 10. That is OWASP GitHub Project Top 10. So what we're seeing here is the top 10 most starred OWASP repos. If you don't know, on GitHub, there is a notion of a star, so you can star it or bookmark a particular project. And that basically usually indicates how popular this project is. And you can see that NetTacker is currently on the 8th place. And I was actually surprised to find out that top 10 is not actually not number one. The most popular OWASP project is Cheat Sheet Series. This is really good to find out, because OWASP Top 10 is probably the most downloaded PDF file, but not the most popular open source project for collaboration. So there you go. That is another OWASP Top 10. So what is coming up in version 003, which is the current version? The modules are all written in YAML, which means you can go and create your own module. And that will be a module to scan for anything you want, discover a vulnerability, which is fully defined by you, or perform a brute forcing attack. So if you have a set of credentials and say, okay, this is where my endpoint is, and that I want to perform a brute force using SSH or whatever, you can define it in YAML. And yeah, and we are welcoming all the contributors to contribute. Please do check out the developers page on the wiki. Again, you don't have to be a Python developer to help us. You can help us with translation and documentation. Yeah, that's it. Go and attack your network before the real attackers do. I think I have time for a couple of questions. Yeah.
How does this work with very large networks /16s? For instance, taking a look at tools like Axiom to do distributed scanning at scale.
It works. It's just going to be quite slow. And again, because you can control the number of threads, you can make it slower or faster. But it works. I did scan the /16 network of an organization, a very large bank in the city of London. Worked perfectly. And as a result, we had all the results in the database, and we got a really big Excel spreadsheet.
Can you chain the searches together? So the first search might be one that finds hosts that are open or have an open port, and then you run a scan on them based on the database?
Yes, that was the whole idea of NetTacker. And it doesn't currently work with all the modules, but there are modules that you can chain, and they're based on the previous module output. So, for example, if you have a web server responding on port 80, only then you will perform the scan. Same thing with WordPress. If there's no web server running, it will not run the WordPress scan. So we are enhancing that. So we are planning to do something like workflows. So you can actually, just like you create profiles, you create workflows. And you put the modules in a chain, and you define what you expect to find for the whole workflow to do its job. Any more questions? No? Yeah.
Do you think it's worthwhile adding a feature to be able to check for the HTTP headers as well? Because you were on about checking like the server header, but there are other headers as well that we should also
scan. And you can create a module yourself. You can do it easy. Any particular header you want, you can. You want to check if it returns cookies? Yeah, you can check for any header, anything which is in the response from the target. And because it also combined with brute forcing, I think that it makes it like a really awesome little tool. Any more questions? Okay. Oh, one more. Sorry.
So you mentioned about the plugins written in YAML file.
Yeah.
But will the plugins written in Python script will be deprecated in the current version? Or
No. So the in version 002, the modules themselves, the core and the modules are written in Python. In version 003, the modules are described as YAML. But the core is still in Python.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.